Hey, welcome to another episode of Electrical Theology, Esoteric Life Coaching. Let's start that over. Hey, welcome to another episode of Electrical Theology, Esoteric Life Coaching. I'm your host, Charles, and I'm here to help people. Hey, welcome to another episode of Electrical Theology, Esoteric Life Coaching, where I help people take responsibility for their thoughts, actions, and emotions by understanding the esoteric universe. So let's get started, guys. This week we're going to understand the origins of Thinng-ness and understand that all Thinng-ness came from a thought. So we're going to look at the origins of thought. That makes sense? So in this video, we're going to look at the foundations. Where do we find our thoughts? How do we get to our thoughts? The origin of thought energy. That if everything is energy, then energy becomes thought, then thought becomes thing. So we'll touch on that as well. And then we'll look at how that flows, how energy or thought flows, and then how we can create or how energy creates. All right. So let's get on the origin of me. Just for those who don't know me a little bit, I have a lot of backgrounds in a lot of things. Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm not an expert in any one field, but I like studying all fields. So the backgrounds I have are, as you can see, the paranormal, religious, folklore, metaphysics, and so on and so forth. I've studied these things my entire life. I've dealt with the paranormal since I was a young child. I've studied energies, the subtle tones, the subtonals, people's frequencies, their tonations, vibrations, whatever you want to put words to it. But I've read and dealt and studied and understanding electricity as I feel it from people and places and things. All right? So let's get into the foundation. The foundation basically is found ions. Right? When you go through life, you find things, right? We found our perfect job. We found our perfect mate. We found our perfect. How did this finding come to be? So we don't need to find energy. We are energy. So in essence, we found ourselves once we understand that we're energy. So there's no more finding to find, if that makes sense. All right. So there's no finding you. There is only creating you. So part of finding is I use it as defining. I want to define something because that gives me a meaning, right? What's the meaning of something? Well, what's the definition of something? It's sort of interplay there, but the only way I understand me is by defining me, or energy, or ions, as we will use that word throughout our studies here. And understanding what your thoughts are energy, which are ions, that will become ions, or what I'm using as the word ion. An ion is just electrical particles. Again, we're going to avoid the complicated and the idea behind these teachings. I'm going to take what I've studied over decades and simplify it, at least in a manner to help you step by step to become and take responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and emotions. All right? So we're here to create ourselves. No one is going to create you but you. You can allow others to create for you and manage for you, but ultimately it's up for you to manage yourself and to create yourself and to bring the energy or electricity or ions to you via electromagnetism, and through that you can then repel things out of your life and attract the things you do want. Because attraction is just attract ions, or repellation is to repel those ions. All right, makes sense? If I'm going too fast or too slow for some of y'all, because this is a beginner's type class, I studied with a lot of secret societies. I was Air Force and special operations and some other stuff. So there's information that the public doesn't have. It doesn't mean, in one sense, that they can't gain access to it, but part of secret societies is about having and taking responsibility, again, for your thoughts, actions, and emotions. And if you haven't done that, if you're still in blame or fault or victim, prosecutor, what's the word? And if you haven't taken responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and emotions, or that you're still blaming or faulting others, or that you're still in the victim triangle of victim, prosecutor, and rescuer or savior, then you're not taking full responsibility for your thoughts about what occurred to you. Now, what occurs to us sometimes is out of our control. It's part of the universe unfolding itself. And we are the ions within that universe unfolding itself. But as we become sentient in ourselves, then we begin to take responsibility for what we think about what happened to us. And those thoughts are what I'm here to help you take responsibility for and regulate. So moving on, if for whatever reason we're not moving fast enough or it's too slow, I mean, if we're moving too fast or we're moving too slow, leave a comment down below. But again, remember, this is just the basics. And we will get in, we can delve for years and years and years of the esoteric and the supernatural, but for now we're just going to keep it simple for those who have never been or have access to it, because we want to make sure that once they do take responsibility, that then this information is in plain sight. And I'm going to help you see what's in plain sight, but we need to make sure that you can handle this new pathway or a new pathway of energy, right, and take responsibility for it and serve it to our community. So if we want everything that you know, and I'm calling a thing, everything is a person, place, or thing, or thought, or action. These are all things. And all these things projected themselves and ended up becoming, period. But where did these thoughts come from? How can we take responsibility for our thoughts, actions, and emotions if we don't know where they're coming from? And who's creating these thoughts? And what you'll find out is that you all are the author of your own ship, your own penmanship, your own thinking ship, your relationships, and so on and so forth. We'll get into the ships later. But for now, let's look at an oak chair, a rocking chair, an oak rocking chair. And this oak rocking chair is in a current reiteration or iteration. But where did the rocking chair come from? Where did the parts come to make it? Well, basically, we know it came from the oak wood. Now, the chair is a chair, but it's an oak chair. And this oak chair came from oak wood. Now, the oak, and we can use oak in this references ion or energy. And so this oak or ion energy came from somewhere, and it came from a board, a plank, if you will, an oak plank. And that oak plank came from an oak tree. And that oak tree came from an acorn. And that acorn was built with constituents from fire, water, earth, and air, or from the ground, electricity, and so on, water, and so forth. But where did those constituents come from? See, we can keep going back and back and back and back, and we'll end up with no thingness. And that's what I'm here to present today, is the origin of where everything started, which is no thingness. And we'll give it some other names as well, all right? But just understand that at some point, are you, in understanding that if you are the rocking chair, do you know and have you contemplated, which is with, con meaning with, and template, contemplate, template. So if you are contemplating your origin, then you'll end up back in space, which is just consciousness, which is no thingness. And so we get in touch with our no formness. Make sense? All right, and so when things became to form, we have an originality or an original thought. And this original thought ends up becoming through a process of energy unfolding itself. It becomes people, places, and things. And part of the native people all have stories of creation, of how they became, how the world became, how the universe was born. Everything from Big Bang to a bunch of animals coming together in parts and creating it, or a great eagle, or an egg that hatched. There's many mythologies about how we all got started, but if you look at the stories and extract the symbology, there's an energy behind the story, and if you can follow the chain of energy behind the story, you'll get to the origin, and the origin is no thing, if that makes sense for now. But these are all the stories of myth or creation stories, and these creation stories all have a beginning, a middle, and an end, or a birth, death, resurrection, and a birth, death, or resurrection, and rebirth, and so on and so forth. So right now we're going to focus on ions being the genesis thought, or the beginning. So in the beginning was the thought, but before the thought there was no thought. There was no consciousness. Make sense? So how does energy flow? Well, when it comes out, and right now we're just going to call energy ion or it. So when it started flowing, it started rotating. Now we'll get into later on because it gets complicated a little bit, that we are, in essence, a black hole. You and I are black holes. And the cells within our body are creating energy from somewhere. So it's pulling energy from somewhere, space, and then producing that. So if something's coming in and it's going out, what we'll focus on right now is what's coming out. Later on, we will focus on how or where and what it is of where it comes from that creates what is. Make sense? If not, leave me a comment below. Because this can get complicated, but in one essence, it's very simple once you know it. So yeah, it begins to spiral, and it rotates. Now, spiral and rotate's a little different here. Spiral is that it just shoots out into a spiral. And if you've ever seen an F-16 fly over water, you'll end up with a spiral coming out of the back of it. Because when energy comes out and energy is thrusted out, it takes on a rotation. Now, this rotation in itself creates friction because it's meeting another property. We'll just keep it simple. And once this rotation is creating friction from this other property, then this other property and that starts mixing, and it creates a rotating or rotary action, which then creates heat and other atmospheric properties. We'll keep it simple there for right now. But then this continual rotation, it starts slowing down, and this slowing down starts creating spirals. And the spirals end up becoming spirit or spirales then spirits, and so on and so forth. And these spirits get arced into archangels or archangles of spirals. So once it came out, after it spiraled and rotated, it expressed itself. And so it and pressed. So wherever it came from, it got pressed out. Just like a Play-Doh, you push the Play-Doh and you get a shape coming out. So there was an impression, a press of ions coming out that then thrust them out, that caused them to spiral, that then caused them to expand. And so pan, out of X and pan, the pan part of it is God. It's not the anthropomorphic God, and not even that God. That is what's expressing itself. So the expression, or the expand, but in traditional speak, pan means all, or God, or pan, like in pantheism, or pantheon, or panentheistic, or pantheistic, panacea. So there's a lot of words with pan in it. And it's just these stories like Peter Pan, and so they're showing you how something comes out of nothing, and then it goes back to light. But as this, now we're going to just fast forward to a lot of action, and this starts spiraling into where the spirals start becoming sentient or understanding itself, and it creates a transmitter and receiver part. And what later on becomes, we are an expression of that spiraling action, which becomes a double helix, which is then a transmitter for information. And information is just formed ions, informed ions, information. And so they're in a formation. Just like in military, we had formations we had to walk in. And so these formations ended up helping us create order. And once we understand how order is created, it came out of formation. So if you want order to your life, then we got to create information or formed ions. Making sense? All right, let's get on to how it creates. So as this energy, again, how are we created? How are things? We are things, so how is this thingness of us created? And again, we talked about the spiraling or spirited action. As the spirit or the spiral became more spirited, it became what we would then become conscious of itself. And it becomes a spirit, but it's still within, we'll call it the supernatural or etheric or astral realms. And as it keeps spiraling and rotating and it gets thicker and thicker, starts cooling down after heating up, it becomes formed. And once this, like if you melt liquid, or what we know is silver, before silver is silver, we melt it down, but it's a liquid at high temperature. But once it cools down, it becomes a silver bar or bouillons. And once this process continues, which that is always expressing itself because there's always something coming from somewhere. Again, there's a deconstruction and reconstruction and construction process. And we'll get into this a lot later, but again, keeping it simple. And that's the black hole theories that we're talking about. And once the cells in our body are sucking in nutrients and then it spits out debris, if you will. But there's also electromagnetic conscious debris. And it's up to us to form this debris or thought, action. And so we put into action thoughts, and action is acting ions. So we act on these ions that are spewing out, but it's up to us to put them in right thought or right order. Making sense, a little more sense right now? I hope it is. And we'll get into this as we go on further, but this is just the basics. So how does this play? Why is this important to even understand that and this and spirals and actions and this? Well, it's going to help us take responsibility again for your thoughts, actions, and emotions and how to put your life in order. And by order, we need to understand how the universe got put in order in the first place. So once you align with that universal energy consciously, then you can begin to act on your own ions and create your own ions or creation or recreate those or recreate, same word. See how we're playing with these words? And it's ions, energy. The universe is built into everything, person, place, or thing, word, action, everything. All right, so do we really need to know or understand the origin of all things? No, but if you choose to take responsibility, then the practice is to understand the outcome. If you are receiving outcomes that you don't like, then it was because of a behavior. And that behavior or that habit ended up coming from a behavior, and then that behavior came from how you gave meaning to something. And that meaning came because you interpreted something. And that interpretation came because you had a thought or a life event or a life event or a life experience. We'll put it that way simply. So understanding that when you think and you focus on this, it becomes it goes from the intangible to the tangible. Intangible is not yet formed. It's formed in the supernatural, but it's not formed in the physical. But once it forms in the physical, because you're focusing on it and you're giving energy and you keep rotating or cycling around this victim triangle or blame or fault action, it's outside you of why you feel the way you're feeling. It's the thoughts that you're giving what's happening outside of you that's giving you your feelings or emotions. And emotions are just emoting ions or moving ions, right? You're the one moving this energy. You're the captain of your own ship. This is a flesh-bagged vessel, and this vessel is up to you to put in order, be it health, wealth, and love, or mechanical, chemical, electrical, whatever trinities you want to put into it. So anyway, thoughts. So for an example, if you have a thought that you have a tendency to quit everything, or that you don't want to disappoint people, well, we can put into a collaboration that if you keep quitting things, it's because you're probably not wanting to disappoint someone. And so if you're trying not to disappoint someone, it's because you're not wanting to disappoint yourself. So the esoteric, we can look at the exo reflection of that we don't want to disappoint someone, but we can esoteric reflect that. And what is it that we don't want to disappoint? Well, what is it that we don't want to disappoint ourselves with? Right? Are we disappointing? Do we not? Disappointment is dis and point. Where are you not pointing or focusing what you want in this life? That makes sense? Again, this is what we're going to be delving into week after week. So please stay tuned, subscribe, like, all that good stuff, guys. I really appreciate that. So this is all going to help you take ownership or owner of your vessel of which energy comes into. And it's going to help us understand our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, everything. And so these are the points basically to remember what we talked about today, just to sum it all up. There's an origin to everything. Everything came from a no thingness. After the origination, energy spirals and rotates and heats up and then cools down and forms. Thought energy expands and expresses itself into thingness, which is you, your thoughts, everything about you, your feelings. And ultimately, you are responsible for this thingness of your thoughts. All right? Hopefully this video has helped you out a little bit to maybe even hear something different than you already knew before, or maybe it was not useful to you, and that's okay. We appreciate that. But in the next video, we're going to get into what energy turns into that which is this, and the Shambhala and the hierarchy, and the God and the Southern consciousness. So if this sounds interesting to you. I look forward to seeing you next time, and thank you for joining me.